Welcome to the Rural Realtor Podcast, where we talk about all things country with a special eye towards country and rural real estate. I'm your host, Bill Gaughan, and joining me today from Bulletproof Pond and Lake are Ryan Cowart, to my immediate left, and Johnny Murray. And we're going to talk about, it's hard to talk about country property when there isn't a discussion about ponds. Does it have a pond? Could it have a pond? It's got a pond, but it's terrible. And it needs to be fixed, or is it even worth discussing? And so today we're going to talk with these gentlemen about what they do at Bulletproof Pond and Lake. But before we start, I just want to let people know how impressive I find your work. I've had the opportunity to view some of their projects. I've talked with them on several occasions. And if you think building a pond means getting a bulldozer and a dam and you can fix it in a day and it's all done, I think you're going to learn there's a little bit more to it. So, as I said, I always say I'm the luckiest man in the world because I get to make other people's dreams come true, and I'll be talking a little more about that as we get into the podcast. So, as I understand it, your company has two different divisions. Is that right?
Yeah. We have, think of our company as it's kind of split in half. We have a part that builds ponds, and we have a part that repairs ponds. There's a lot of ponds that need repaired.
Well, we see that all the time as we view country property, and they're excited. They see a pond, but it's just really a mud hole for the most part.
Oh, yeah.
Johnny, are you always able to fix a pond, or are there some that just need to be scrapped? And
we can pretty much always come up with some type of solution. Now, how economical or uneconomical the solution will be, it kind of depends on the situation. But right now we've got pond and dam repair running at about 60 or 70% of our business. And that makes a lot of sense when you drive out to the countryside and, about half the ponds you see out there or more are a quarter of the way filled up or halfway filled up or just lots of weeds, or you hear about a lot of leaking dams and stuff like that. So we like to think we can always come up with some type of solution. Just how economical it's going to be, it always just kind of depends on how severe the issue is.
And as I'm thinking about it, I guess it makes sense because whoever originally built the pond probably built it in the best place to build it to begin with, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so if you can salvage it, it's probably easier to do that than hope you can find some other spot to build one. Am I right about that?
That's not necessarily always the case. Sometimes we see where, for example, we went out for a pond repair visit last week, and a pond builder or a general constructor, a construction guide came in and built them a pond. But he built it in a really flat place, and it had a berm all the way around the pond to where pretty much the only water it was catching was the water that was falling from the sky. And, filling a pond up like that is going to take a while. We're trying to keep a general rule of thumb of 10 acres of runoff to 1 acre of pond. So if you don't have kind of that basic necessity there, it's going to be tough to keep one full.
How long has Bulletproof Pond and Lake been doing this? How long have you been in business?
So we've been in business since 2019. 2019 is the year that we officially incorporated and became a legal business. Ponds and lakes, we've been doing that anywhere between, the time frame is pretty iffy there because we used to be like an anything and everything excavation company. We used to do all of your foundation excavations and terraces and farm stuff and driveways and anything you could think of. But somewhere along the lines, probably 3 or 4 years ago, we made that switch into saying, you know what, we're going to make a leap here. We're going to kind of take a gamble on the market here and what's happening, and we're only going to focus on ponds. So we're only going to build those and kind of become a company that does just one thing.
Excellent. Has been successful for you? Is it business growing?
It's grown beyond belief.
Yeah, I would say, I came in May, started with the company in May of last year. And whenever I initially came in the door, we were Bulletproof Landworks for about a week or two. And then we made, and it was really a major marketing decision to switch over to Bulletproof Pond and Lake. We were still in that mindset at Bulletproof Landworks of we want to build ponds and really luxury ponds at that. But as far as from a marketing standpoint, if you want to build ponds and you don't have pond in the name, it's kind of a tough game there. So once we made that switch to Bulletproof Pond and Lake, it was kind of like flipping a light switch. The calls really started coming in, especially with the dam repair and pond repair, and then as well as the construction side.
And, as I think about it, it makes perfect sense because you're right. Everybody else that I know of, they're an excavating company.
Mhm.
Yeah. And if you aren't familiar with the industry, you don't necessarily translate that into being a pond and lake
You're
business.
absolutely right.
So, well, good for you guys.
Yes.
And I know one question that comes up and we get asked all the time when people are wrong, what's the difference between a pond and a lake?
So that's a really tough question. There really, the short answer is there isn't one. There really isn't a definition. You can look it up on Google. You'll find probably 1,000 different answers. What we call a pond and a lake is anything really over 5 acres is what we are going to consider a lake. And the reason being is just the magnitude of the, not really just, hey, what is the financial feasibility of the project? Usually projects, as they start to get over 5 acres, you start to have to get Army Corps of Engineer involvement. It's a little bit more permitting, water appropriation rights. You start to have more land to drain into that to actually feed it. So a lot of things start to come into play at really that 5 acre mark where not only the cost of the pond, drives up, but the effort and planning and permitting process and just the whole process in general gets a little bit bigger. So that's kind of the differentiator that we start saying, your pond becomes a lake at about 5 acres.
Now, where is the point at which you can go from, hey, I want to put a 1.5 acre pond out here in the pasture to, all right, now we need to talk to the Corps of Engineers and other governmental.
Yeah. So the interesting thing with that is it's different for every state. It's kind of, first of all, so the regulations regarding water, it's different for every county, every state, every city. There's regulations by the city, by the county, by the state on all of that. But typically, what we see is that the state likes to see that whenever a pond is, you have a dam that's 25 feet or any taller than that, that's whenever the Army Corps of Engineers or the state wants to start getting involved. Whenever it's 50 acres or holding 50 acre feet of water or more, that's whenever they also like just to start getting involved. Because at that point, you're holding a lot of water. If there's 50 acre feet of water in there, that's, billions of gallons. So there's a lot of water. There's a lot of weight. There's a lot of pressure up there that can come crashing down if, let's say, your typical excavation company is building that pond.
Yeah, so they're concerned about a dam failure and downstream flooding, and that's
Yep,
that.
Absolutely. And then, in adjacent or kind of, I guess, with that, whenever you're starting to dam up that much water, I mean, that's a lot of water that, let's say, you are now depriving the environment downstream from for the period of time that the pond's filling up. A lot of ponds and lakes, and there are actually a lot of lakes like, let's say, Perry Lake, Clinton Lake, Tuttle Creek Lake, all those lakes are mainly for flood control. They're mainly in rivers to kind of act as a buffer where if you get those 100-year flood events, those lakes really take the brunt of filling up and then slowly releasing the water. So a lot of that happens with ponds and lakes, and they're great for the environment for that, especially on a smaller scale. But put in the wrong area or put in let's say in a stream that has, some sort of species of animals downstream that rely on that water. If that isn't kind of looked at ahead of time, you can start depriving things of that.
Now, I know in Kansas in particular, every now and then I run into what they call a watershed lake. Do you get involved with those? And what's a watershed lake used for?
That's a good question. Watershed lakes typically refer to, lakes just made out of watershed. And oftentimes it is flood prevention, flood damage prevention is really what it is. So it's just how can we, whenever you do get those really big rain events, how can we capture that water and slowly release it?
Very good. Now, from your perspective, Johnny, I so often, when people are buying property, the ponds are in such bad shape. What's your as a diagnostician, but figure out how we fix this pond? Is there a particular process you always follow to give the guy good news, bad news, or a cost?
Yeah, there's, I wouldn't say there's a particular, way that we approach the good news, bad news situation. But it is kind of, you just gotta kind of rip the Band-Aid off and give it to the customer straight. That's all anybody wants, is to be treated with respect and given the news directly. And we run into situations, like today I went out on on a field evaluation, and the guy really wanted a pond in the backyard, but his water table set at about 2.5 feet from the top of the ground. So with that being said, it's going to double or triple the cost to build a pond there. And so we really go into every evaluation with a completely open mind and assuming nothing. You want to assume nothing in this business because that will get you in a lot of trouble very, very quickly. So we go into all of these renovations, especially renovations with new landowners or new homeowners, with a completely open mind and a mindset that we can turn this into whatever dream that they have in their head.
You know, when we sell a property that's got a home on it, of course, we have the typical, we always have home inspections done, and we have septic inspections done. If a property has a pond on it that looks a little iffy, do you provide a service of doing an inspection and giving somebody a thumbs up or thumbs down?
Absolutely. We have kind of a 3-tiered evaluation process. So a tier 1 evaluation is where we're simply going to go out and look at the property, look at the pond site, and then speak with the landowner about, what do we have going on? A tier 2 evaluation is where we're going to come out and either do a LiDAR or we're going to do a LiDAR survey, and then we're also going to do a soil sample evaluation. So we're going to see what's in the ground, and then we're also going to send up the LiDAR drone and go ahead and collect all of the data on that property. So we'll get things like runoff, all of the topography readings, and then the exact all the data that we need to put that pond into a civil engineering and design program and build it out the way that we want to. And then the tier 3, it includes all of that plus I guess the tier 3 is more of the construction side of things when we're building a pond from brand new. That'll come with all of the CAD design plans as well as the soil samples and the in-person evaluation.
Two of the most common problems that I see is an older pond and the dam is completely tree covered.
Mm-hmm.
Are those salvageable?
Absolutely. And we really preach to keep the dams clean.
Yeah.
But as you can imagine, if a pond was built 60 years ago and there's been very little maintenance done to the dam, it's going to grow some trees. So those trees, it's funny how nature works. And I tell all of my clients this, and, you get out there on the pond dam and you look at these giant trees, and somehow that tree knows exactly where that water is on the other side of that dam. So those roots, they will grow straight through the dam and they will grow on through until they punch through to the other side. But really that's, they don't even have to make their way completely through the dam to cause leaks. Because dams are going to seep, even if they're built out of the best clay in the world, they're going to seep to some extent. Now that's why you install at least a 12-foot wide core trench and, that's got really good clay in it. So it allows for some seepage into the dam, but it's not going to seep through the dam. But definitely with those trees on there, they can definitely wreak havoc.
But can they be salvaged?
Absolutely, for sure. And one way that we can kind of repair a dam that say has had a bunch of trees grow roots through it, we can go in there and put a new core liner in it. So we can either go back with a clay core inside the dam, which will break all of the roots loose and then recompact it in with clay, or we can trench that dam out and put a plastic liner inside the dam, which will seal it off completely.
I would not have thought of any of those things. You get it. I think for most
of Ryan here, he's got quite the imagination. He approached me about this idea last year of putting a plastic liner down the center of the dam. And it was a long summer last year, but we came up with a process that is, one of a kind, absolutely. And we've had tremendous success with it. This is something we put kind of a good faith guarantee behind our work, and we want to make sure that every customer is completely satisfied. And knock on wood, up to this point, we've had a lot of satisfied customers with those dam repairs.
Yeah, absolutely. And that plastic liner idea, it's something that was so successful that we even went out and seeked out where. Now that's a process that has a patent pending on it where, we've kind of developed a new process that's never been done. And it's something that we can now say, if we put that liner in your dam, we can guarantee your dam isn't going to leak wherever that liner's at.
The other problem, that's amazing. The other problem I see is that dams have gotten over time, ponds have gotten very shallow during siltation. Is there a fix for that?
Absolutely. Yeah, that's one of the more common issues with a lot of these older ponds. If you think about when the ponds were built, 50, 60, 70 years ago, a lot of government money got put out there to build ponds all across the country. And so you have this big selection of ponds built all over the place, and just anybody and everybody building. And so with that, there hasn't been a lot of maintenance over the last few decades. And so, and it really doesn't even take, decades for your pond to silt in. And that's what happens with these shallow areas that you see, 99% of the time, somebody didn't just dig a shallow pond. They might have dug a pond that had good 3-to-1 slopes on it and a minimum depth of 4 feet. But over the years, that prairie is trying to reclaim itself. It's trying to fill that pond back in. And so that's why you see so many shallow ponds, and then just a lot of algae and vegetation.
Yeah.
We can go in there with an excavator, and we can do a selective dredge where we just dredge out a shoreline, or we can go in there and drain the pond and pretty much start over from scratch and remove all of the muck in it. But that's a big part of our business right now, is just going in and doing these selective muck outs where we dredge out the shorelines and get those depths back down to 4 or 5 feet. And it's like a new pond after that.
I love the term you used when we talked earlier. You talked about a luxury pond.
Uh-huh.
And if you get a chance, you'd follow them on Facebook, because on a regular basis, they show the process of ponds and some of the ones that they have built. When a landowner sits down, let's say it's one of our customers, and he thinks he's got a good spot that he'd like to have a pond built. What's your process to kind of do the pond building, as Johnny was talking about, to do pond reclamation?
Yeah. Well, I mean, with pond building, it oftentimes, you can go about it either way, but sometimes it's actually a lot more simple than repairing or reclaiming a pond, because now you're getting to create something exactly however your mind really thinks about it. So with pond building, essentially what happens is everything always starts off with a phone call and just kind of looking at things online maps. How can we use, Google Maps, Onyx Maps, any sort of topography maps online to map out, hey, what's possible? What is the drainage area going to allow us to build? Johnny mentioned earlier, we're always trying to go for 10 acres of runoff to 1 acre pond. So oftentimes we're looking at how much runoff is feeding an area. Let's say we find an area, and based on those contour maps, let's say this is a 30-acre property, and we find that there are 10 acres that feed one specific area very nicely. So we're like, hey, we can pretty well assume that there's going to be a 1 acre pond we can put there. Well, after that, what we'll do is we'll go ahead and make the drive out there, and we'll go through and poke some holes in the ground. And essentially those holes are drilled in the ground anywhere from like 10, 12, 15 feet deep. And what we're trying to figure out through that process is, what kind of soil do we have here? At 5 feet down, what kind of soil do we have there? At 10 feet down, what kind of soil is there? At 12 feet, does it turn to gravel or sand? So we're trying to get an idea throughout the area that we're trying to build that pond. What's the soil like? And once we have that, we'll do a LiDAR survey, which, we have this drone that's got a LiDAR camera on it. It flies its little path.
What's LiDAR stand for? I've heard you mention that.
So it's something with light imaging and radar detection.
Okay.
Essentially what it is if you can think of a laser rangefinder, let's say you use it for golf or hunting, any sort of like laser rangefinder. It's essentially that, but it puts out like 500 to 1,000 laser pulses a second. And it flies over, and it uses like a geo-mapping thing, and we import a coordinate system into it. And it'll essentially grab your land and map it out and take pictures of it and give us a perfect 3D model of exactly what that looks like. And in our office, whenever we put that into our AutoCAD software, which is pretty much the next step after that survey, we can take all the trees, all the houses, any sort of high vegetation off that, and it'll tell us exactly how just the bare earth sits. So whenever we have just that bare earth model, we can then go in there and start designing, hey, what would a pond, as far as, designing it, what would it take to actually design a 1 acre pond here? And what's really interesting is then that software can tell us, hey, if we build a pond that's exactly this big around, so 1 acre in size, with this size dam, let's say it's 14 feet tall, 20 feet tall, 14 feet wide, it has, 3-to-1 slopes on the front and back. We're going to need, X amount of overflow pipe, and it's going to take X amount of dirt to move there. So we've gotten to a point now where we can essentially survey the land, have a software that tells us how much dirt to move, and then take that plan that we've designed, put it on a flash drive, plug it into a machine, and have essentially a 3D model in the machine that we can then drive off of and essentially run GPS in our machines off of. So everything is turned into a computer system where we can quite literally turn a design straight into real life.
Wow.
And it really helps with the accuracy on the project. So whenever you're thinking about building a pond and you're putting together a proposal, you really want to go through this proposal process one time. That's what we shoot for. Let's make one proposal, send it through, get it signed, and let's get to work. And so the best way you can do that is with the highest accuracy possible. And so this LiDAR drone, it's shooting out how many data points per square foot?
It's anywhere between like 140 to 200.
So let's just say a ridiculous amount of data points per square foot. And so you're getting all of that data. And just a quick example, out on a property with a customer the other day, and he was talking about the amount of drop he had from the front of his pasture to the back of his pasture. And it had a small excavation company come out there, and this guy was trying to help him get a read on what the drop was like. And he had the old school transit system where you look through the telescope lens there and you have to look at a stick that's on the other side of the pasture. He was up there on a ladder and trying to telescope it and all of that. So the time that it took them to get that one measurement of, hey, we've got 9 foot of drop from the back of the pasture to the front. Well, we collected millions of data points and all of this data that we can then slide over into CAD software. We can simply click on one end of the pasture, click on the other end, and it'll tell us within a couple of inches exactly what the drop is.
Wow.
So it really, from things like that, trying to figure out something like that, to figuring out the cubic yardage, how much how much cubic yardage do we have to move for this project? That really helps the accuracy in putting out a really good proposal.
Yeah.
Now, do you have to bring in, like clay from time to time to supplement a pond to get if you don't have the right type of soil to build the dam?
We could have to do that. It's not something that we get into a whole lot just because we really are thorough in our evaluation process. Sometimes right here in the bottom of the valley, you may not have any clay to work with, but then you move 2 acres over to the other side of the pasture or the other side of the field, and there's a huge clay deposit sitting there and a little hump in the field. And so we can import it, say, from there versus having it trucked in. Because honestly, unless you have a clay pit that's right there close to your property, you're probably going to be about the same cost to put in a plastic liner on the entire pond as you would be to spend a week hauling clay from another location.
Now, when you talk about these luxury ponds, tell us about some of the more creative and maybe exotic things you've seen people want that you've built into a pond.
Yeah. I mean, some of the really interesting things that's completely doable for most of them. So sometimes you think of luxury and, depending on your specific outlook on it, you kind of think of it as unobtainable, let's say. But one of the super amazing things that we can do is like peninsulas or islands and ponds. And then if you start taking those and wrapping them in like a limestone block or a limestone block border, you can really make a super incredible entertaining area where you're surrounded by water then. And we've gone as far as to put outdoor kitchens on those islands and those liners, and do things like waterfalls on the sides. And then
you run power out to them.
Yeah, absolutely. And then, overall along with that, there's swimming areas. We actually recently did a pond that's, it's like a 1/4 acre in size, but it's quite literally just a gigantic swimming pool. I mean, it's tiered down. It's got gravel on the inside. It is really quite a swimming haven.
Wow. Wow.
And Ron brings up a good point with the swimming pond. We every now and then you get on a sales call and there's that whenever you give them a rough estimate, and always try to get people to think of it in terms of, okay, imagine if you were building a swimming pool in your backyard, let's call it a 12 feet wide by 30 foot long swimming pool. These days, an in-ground swimming pool is probably going to run you pretty close to $100,000. And $100,000 will get you one heck of a pond. It will get you really close to a lake, if not get you a lake. It will go a long ways whenever you're talking about how much water can you buy for that kind of money.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now, do you ever get requests that somebody says, I want to build a luxury fishing pond here. I want good habitat at the bottom. Okay. What type of things do you do for that?
So those are really interesting projects, and some of my favorite for sure. Because we'll actually go through there and we'll start designing a pond and trying to figure out, hey, structurally, how can we make sure that we have a pond that has the right depths for the fish they want, and is the right size for the fish they want? How can we make sure that we have a structurally sound pond to support all that, and the watershed that's going to support that? And then we'll bring in another company, like let's say Midwest Lake Management, which they're a company here pretty locally, just north of Kansas City. And they are kind of a biologist. So they can then go in and say, hey, we need to put this fish structure in this part of the pond. And, they're looking at our plans at that point and say, we can put fish structure in this point. We can leave some of these trees in, let's say on this other side of the pond, create some natural habitat there. We'll bring in some pea gravel, put in some spawning beds, let's say up in these shallow areas, make some wetlands over there. And truly actually take a structural side and a biological side to it and combine them and really make a pretty killer pond. Really an awesome pond for fishing.
Well, one of the things that I've seen you done recently, if I'm not mistaken, you're building a waterfowl lake in Oklahoma.
Yeah, we just finished that up. It was 10 acres. And that was specifically a lake that was designed where, at full pool, it's just a normal fishing pond. But then we have a valve in there in the overflow system that you can close. You can actually adjust the water level up 6 inches, a foot and a half, 2 feet, and flood more and more land as you do that, and create an area where, let's say, in the summertime, you can go through and plant wheat, corn, barley, all these things where, it's dry land. And then in the fall, go through and put in your stop logs, raise that water level up, create all that flooded land that's right next to then, a big body of water. And that's going to be an amazing spot for
that's pretty impressive. What's your trade area? Where are you willing to go to do work?
We can go everywhere. We very commonly get, for whatever reason, a lot of requests in Oklahoma, typically around Tulsa. Recently, there's just been a surge of stuff there. But it's not common for us to get, calls from Texas, Nebraska. We have a project coming up soon in Iowa. We have a project here soon in Arkansas. And then, of course, right here pretty close in Missouri, we have tons of projects there.
I was over in St. Louis yesterday looking at a project. The last couple of weeks, I've been down in the Ozarks around Joplin and Springfield and down in that area. And we really try to preach that we'll go where the work is. There's I remember when I started, Brian told me about a clay vein that pretty much runs from North Dakota all the way down to Texas and kind of a diagonal across the country. And I did some looking into that, and there is a major clay vein that runs right through kind of the heartland of the country here. And and so we like to preach that's our home.
Yeah.
From the Gulf to the Canadian border, pretty much, we will put a pond in there.
Yeah.
Now, from our perspective as a real estate agent, when I've got somebody that's wanting to look at a property, and a water feature is a big part of it, I can think of 2 or 3 clients right now that have that. What's the right process? Do we identify a property and send you maps? I want to make it as efficient as possible because, we don't all. What's the best way to engage you if we've got somebody that wants to either refurbish a pond or start from scratch?
A lot of the times it really does start with just sending us a listing, let's say you're interested in, and then just having a 10-minute phone call over it, trying to figure out, hey, what's your goal with the property? What are you wanting to accomplish with that specific area? And then, during that same meeting, we can just pull up the maps right then and there and look at how the land is shaped and tell you what ponds are possible, and tell you, based on the ponds that are there, what you could possibly do with those or what issues you might have, and what to look out for those issues.
And with, consent from the current landowner, say if you're looking at buying a piece of property and it has a great spot for a pond, you just don't know if it has the right soil. With permission from the current landowner, we can go out there and actually do the soil test before you make that purchase. That's something we've done in the past. We've got one client that we're working with, and we're headed towards, property number 3 to go and look at and see if he's got the soil for a pond. And so that's very common for us. And then too, it's great homework on the buyer's part to figure out, hey, can I make my dreams happen here versus saying, hey, this looks like a great place, and we'll go from there.
Yeah, I hate to put somebody in a position where we think this would work and find out it wouldn't, and you want to know in advance.
Yep, absolutely. And a lot of times, especially with raw land, someone's buying it to put, let's say, their dream home there. A lot of times that dream home is quite literally dictated by where that pond or that lake is.
Absolutely. That's very common for our clients. Well, what else would you like our clients to know about your business and that sort of thing that maybe we haven't already touched on today?
Well, I think the biggest thing with that is going through an inspection process and really spending the time in planning out a pond. We get calls quite literally every day about projects that have gone south from other companies, ponds that were just never built right. And then also, kind of hearing about projects where, let's say, someone comes in and starts a pond, and, says, hey, we'll come in, build you a 1 acre pond. Let's say it's 20, 30,000. And then they get started and they find rock or they find sand or there isn't enough clay there. And then they say, hey, we can move it. It's going to cost you more. Like I can think of an instance now where, we're working with a client who, they were going to have a 3 acre pond built, and someone came in and cleared out 2 acres of trees, cost them $30,000, and then said, hey, your pond's going to need a lot more earth to move than we thought. Now that these trees are cleared, probably should break out your pocketbook. So this is going to be over $100,000. So it happens all the time. And it's just because there isn't that planning process, that kind of, it's not incredibly long by any means. I mean, typically it's 2 or 3 weeks. It's nothing crazy. But going through that process to make sure this is actually possible, before putting any money into it, or putting out, I would say, anything over, like, let's say five or 10 grand into it.
What's the best way for somebody to get in touch with your company if they're interested?
Well, definitely our website, bulletproofpondandlake.com. That's absolutely the best way to get in touch with us. And the reason being is on there, we have a lot of upfront pricing about, hey, what are some general, very broad, rough ideas of how much do things cost. So if you're curious about costs, you can go on there and get a pretty good idea of what might something cost, first and foremost. And then after that, there's forms on there to submit things, or, our number is right there. You can call us, right from that website. And then our office people will get back with you usually next day or same day. They are right on that.
That's bulletproofpondandlake.com. And if you forget that, you can go to our website, ruralkc.com, click on business resources, and we got a category for pond and lake builders, and guess who's featured there? So that's another way you can get in touch. Well, Ryan and Johnny, thank you so much for giving us your time. I always find it fascinating. I think most people have no idea what the complexity and the professionalism that goes into building a pond, and you taking your time today to share that with our clients is more than appreciated. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Well, that's our podcast for today. We hope that you enjoyed it. And I mentioned at the start of this podcast that I'm the luckiest guy in the world. That's because Denisha and I get to help people make their dreams come true. And one of the dreams that a lot of people have to come true, they want to live on water or near water. And so having these gentlemen with us to help fulfill that dream of people that's just one of the joys that we have of being part of Rural KC. So whether your dream is to buy or sell country property, be sure and give us a call, because it's all we do, and we love to make it happen for you. We'd love to hear from you. So if you've got a topic you want us to do a podcast on, or just ask some questions about rural property or real estate, or want to know about ponds and lakes, we're glad to talk with you. So give us a call. You can call Denisha at 913-837-0411, or you can call me at 913-837-0760. You can also email us. Denisha is available at Denisha, DANICIA, at ruralkc.com, or me, Bill, much easier than Denisha, Bill at ruralkc.com. And we have a special thing that we do that most business people and even realtors don't do anymore. If you call us, we'll answer the phone, and we will actually talk to you. And you won't get a message that says, if you text me, I'll get back to you faster. We'll call you back anyway if we can't answer it live. So we love talking with people. We love talking with people like Ryan and Johnny, and we love talking with you. And above all, if you do nothing else, take the time to look at our website, ruralkc.com. We think it's the best rural property website in the galaxy, and frankly, we think you will too after you visit it. So this is Rural KC Real Estate, affiliated with Keller Williams Realty Partners, wishing you a blessed day. Until next time.